Dallas pastor TD Jakes is named in a federal lawsuit against musician Sean Diddy.
If Bishop Jakes was at a Diddy party, there could only be two reasons: money or
That's why you find TD Jakes hanging out with Puff Daddy.
Yeah.
All lies will be exposed.
Don't have time to be playing with. You are willing to say goodbye to the season you had.
That doesn't mean the people that are pastors and teachers and preachers of the word of God.
A plethora of other things that include TD Jakes with
Serious criminal charges for alleged acts that happened inside his church with a teenage boy. Youngblood is the pastor of the Higher Call World Outreach.
That's an understatement. He is an icon. And what are the chances that he gets any sort of preferential or royal treatment in the jail? Or, given the charges that are so significant and serious against him, is he going to be treated like any other inmate?
That's incredibly hard to say, right? When you see, and I don't want to generalize here, but when you do see, let's say, accusations against minors, which we don't see in this indictment. You can sometimes see some of these high-profile alleged criminals maybe put into solitary confinement. Will he be treated like any other inmate while he's in this detention center in Brooklyn? It's sort of left to be seen. I think that over the coming weeks, we'll see what happens and what types of motions that his team files if they feel as though he is under immediate threat or if he gets, beat up in prison or in jail. See, I made that mistake. If he gets beat up in jail or if something like that happens, I guess maybe always things could change. I mean, look at Harvey Weinstein, for example. Not that I want to compare the two, but Harvey Weinstein has been been treated in a medical ward because he has all of these medical issues, right? And so the judge had decided even today that he can still stay in the medical ward. So again, I think it's a case-by-case basis, and we have to see how this all plays out. But let's just put it this way. Sean Diddy Combs is a billionaire. He achieved billionaire status in 2022. He is not going to be happy, Tom, being in jail. And this is a far cry from his multi-million-dollar homes all across this country. So obviously it's a huge fall from grace for somebody that was such a pioneer in the music industry.
Yeah, but to your point, Chloe, if it were you or me, not suggesting either one of us would ever face these kinds of charges, but there is no way we'd be out on bail or bond, right? I mean, these are incredibly serious charges that could land him in prison for years and years and years, and they involve violence, not to mention racketeering.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app.
Sending nonviolent defendants there. In April, a group of detainees that prosecutors said were MS-13 gang members in court documents stabbed an inmate 44 times in an attack caught on camera. 2 shivs were recovered from the attack. You see them here. The victim survived. And in the last 3 years alone, 4 inmates have died by suicide. And violence is not the only issue. Accusations of medical neglect, staffing shortages, smuggling of drugs, some allegedly facilitated by employees. At least 6 staff members charged with crimes in the last 5 years, according to the AP. Some accused of accepting bribes and providing contraband.
I've had clients describe NBC as hell, as the worst conditions they've been in.
Lance A. Clark is a federal defense attorney who's been there many times.
Now, if the government is going to mandate that they are responsible for your well-being, they have to ensure the safety of your well-being.
Occupy the streets until they get heat.
In the winter of 2019, protests over a power outage left inmates without light or heat for a week in the cold.
I understand how cold it must be in those cells, and not to have any electricity, any lights, and to not be able to communicate with your family is just inhumane.
The prison has about 1,200 detainees and is the only federal prison in the nation's largest city. The DOJ shut down New York City's other federal jail, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, back in 2021, 2 years after Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide there. A Bureau of Prisons
order here to try and get him actually released to his mansion on $50 million bail, wanting a GPS monitoring system, limited visits from family members, friends, so on and so forth. That is what they're proposing because of course, the violence I talked about in that piece inside these jail walls. They also, in the meantime, Hal, want to get him moved to a jail and or prison in New Jersey. The judge so far has essentially said that is up to the Bureau of Prisons to make that decision. Nonetheless, it's all going to be on appeals leading up to the trial. His next court appearance, by the way, October 9th. So looking for that, of course, and any decisions coming out from the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals on this order.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC.
Say that there might be another indictment. So this just goes to show you that federal prosecutors, that criminal investigation is ongoing. Now, it's unclear what this man will be saying. Remember, grand juries are secret. You're not supposed to know the date and when the grand juries are convening. But obviously, we have this great reporting, and we know that a male is going to be testifying this afternoon. And it's unclear if there will be more charges coming. And like you said, Diddy's legal team, they haven't responded because they can't comment on grand jury proceedings, and the U.S. Attorney's Office hasn't said anything either.
So that's the latest on the criminal side. There's also some civil issues here. Combs faces more than a dozen civil lawsuits. The most recent was filed on Monday. Only one has been settled so far. What's the timeline looking like for these civil cases?
So he has been coming out denying all the accusations against him, both criminal and civil, and he has been fighting them. As we know, he settled with Cassandra Cassie Ventura, his ex-girlfriend, last year for an undisclosed amount of money that was reported to be in the tens of millions of dollars. But I do want to point out something that's really interesting. Last night, a ruling came down from a U.S. district judge in New York stating that one of the civil accusers, a woman who remains anonymous, she goes by Jane Doe, in this civil suit filed by Tony Busby. He's the attorney out of Texas that has filed several lawsuits against Diddy. The judge ruled that this woman had to reveal her identity, or in a few weeks, she's actually going to dismiss this entire case. And this is incredibly significant because could that mean that other civil accusers will face the same fate and have to come forward? The judge said that the idea that she needed to remain anonymous because she was afraid of Combs potentially hurting her or threatening her seemed unlikely because he's currently behind bars awaiting trial. They also said that, yes, in the ruling, the judge said, yes, it's humiliating. It's hard to come forward and to put your name out there, but that does not outweigh the reasons for you having to come forward and put your name to it. So we've reached out to Combs' legal team for comment. This is a win for them. They haven't said anything. I've also reached out to Tony Busby, who filed this suit, and he was the one that filed those new lawsuits, Joe, on Monday. So again, it'll be interesting to see if this affects these civil cases. And again, Combs is expected to go to trial on May 5th. So it's going to be interesting to see, though, if things are going to get pushed back, or could this extend the length of the trial if there is another criminal indictment?
Yeah, and that's that criminal trial. And you do think that that will stay on track for May?
So according to both sides, they believe that this is going to take place on May 5th. But if there are more criminal charges, it could mean that about a 2.5-3 week trial could extend to even longer. So you could see this going on for quite some time.
All right, Chloe, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay up.
As Diddy emerged from the car, a palpable buzz of anticipation filled the air. The courtroom wasn't just a place for legal proceedings today. It had become the center of a media storm. Flashes of cameras lit up the scene as reporters scrambled to capture every moment. The magnitude of what was about to unfold weighed heavily on Diddy's face. Fans and critics alike held their breath, knowing that something monumental was on the verge of being revealed. With every step he took toward the courthouse doors, the world seemed to lean in closer to what could be a life-changing event.
And the place where he's locked up now getting a lot of attention. The Metropolitan Detention Center, the only federal jail in New York City, is known for violence, poor conditions, and a string of celebrity detainees. And Diddy's attorneys want him out. NBC News' Yasmin Youssian has more.
From his $48 million Miami mansion to hell on earth where chaos reigns. Just some of the words used to describe the Metropolitan Detention Center where Sean Diddy Combs is now being held without bail after pleading not guilty to sex trafficking and racketeering charges.
Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
He is not the first high-profile inmate to pass through these walls. Ghislaine Maxwell, R. Kelly, Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli, and crypto fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried, all as they waited for their federal criminal trials, called this jail home. But the conditions of the prison are far from homey, notoriously described as, quote, dreadful, as one judge put it. Some on the bench have even moved away from sending nonviolent defendants there. In April, a group of detainees that prosecutors said were MS-13 gang members in court documents stabbed an inmate 44 times in an attack caught on camera. 2 shivs were recovered from the attack. You see them here. The victim survived. And in the last 3 years alone, 4 inmates have died by suicide. And violence is not the only issue. Accusations of medical neglect, staffing shortages, smuggling of drugs, some allegedly facilitated by employees. At least 6 staff members charged with crimes in the last 5 years, according to the AP. Some accused of accepting bribes and providing contraband.
I've had clients describe MDC as hell, as the worst conditions they've been in.
Lance A. Clark is a federal defense.
Inside the press conference, TD Jakes' words hit hard. His voice rang with authority as he revealed details that would shake the very foundation of the ongoing case. There was no hesitation in his delivery. Each sentence felt like it carried years of insight, and the information he divulged was far beyond what anyone had expected. The audience hung on every word, absorbing the magnitude of the new revelations. What was once a quiet legal matter was now on the brink of becoming an explosive public spectacle.
I'm being accused of obstructing justice.
Diddy running the jail, man. He running the spot.
Right. According to you, the inmates are fighting over making his bed.
Yep. Well, really, according to Lisa Evers, I want to give her credit. Lisa Evers does an amazing job covering all things, within the New York metropolitan area. She interviewed an inmate that spent some time at MDC Brooklyn alongside Diddy. And, remember, we're all thinking that Diddy's like in super isolation. He doesn't talk to no inmates. We later find out via even court filings by the government, he does. And this one inmate looked like he's not wrong because he says, hey, listen, Diddy's such a big player in the game in terms of, his power and he's that guy even in jail. Dudes are getting jealous at other dudes based on who made his bed. And I'm like, yo.
So that's a real thing? Yeah. People are actually making his bed?
Yeah.
I thought you were just joking.
Listen, there's an inmate that said it. There's an inmate that said it, that Lisa Evers, who works for Fox 5.
No, I know Lisa. Yeah. I've done her show before.
Of course. So that's what that inmate said. And I think some people wanted to call it cap till we realized that, the filing that came out on Friday or Thursday by the government, which is a response to Diddy's new motion for bail, essentially said Diddy is using like 8 other inmates, like, personal access codes to call everybody he wants.
Exactly.
It's like, add this person to the call, add this person. Yo, like he's running the jail. So these inmates, I completely believe, and by the way, this is how the government painted it. He's getting them paid directly through what they call these cash processing systems.
Yeah.
So, probably tells his people, send her $1,000. Send his mom, send his girl, cool. And then the inmate in there with him is like, yo, we're going to have your commissary filled. You're going to move around like a king like me. So I get why this is happening. And the only thing I look at is like, why did people believe or think anything otherwise? Like, you think you're going to normalize a billionaire that could have any type? Like, if Diddy walked in a room and this guy's of significant money, power, and even respect, despite whatever happened, and y'all are all in jail, you're not going to be like, yo, bro, he usually don't got to bring his tray over there to throw it away. Nah, I'll do it because I want to be cool with him. I got my people outside. Like, shit, I have a public defender. This guy is spending $2.7 million a month on lawyers. He could throw me, even if he throws me $2,500. Hey, nobody can touch Diddy in here. Matter of fact, I'm going to act like I could be the most bitch-made dude. Hey, I'm just letting y'all know, anybody want to get to him, y'all got to go through me. I'll take the ass whooping for it. So this kind of sounds normal. However, I think people thought Diddy was done when he got to jail. Like, okay, you're finally a degular person. And they're realizing, Diddy didn't work on them.
The transformation was instant. Diddy, who had initially appeared composed, visibly shifted in his seat as the details of the revelation unfolded. His usual calm demeanor began to crack, and those observing in the courtroom could sense his frustration building. His jaw clenched, his hands momentarily shaking as he tried to process the shocking news. It was as if a wall of composure had collapsed in an instant, and in its place, Raw emotion and disbelief took over.
He still did it.
Yeah, he still did it. Come on.
Well, I mean, I went through the filings and the reports. So what they say, according, to the feds, that recorded phone calls made by Diddy showed that he asked family members to reach out to potential victims and witnesses. Also urged them to create narratives to influence the jury pool. Also encouraged them to make marketing strategies to sway the public opinion. Diddy used the telephone accounts of at least 8 different inmates to avoid monitoring. He paid the inmates to intermediaries in violation of the rules, like you said, and he also was using 3-way calls and getting people on the phone, which is illegal. So basically what they said, the defendant has shown repeatedly, even while in custody, that he will flagrantly and repeatedly flout rules in order to improperly impact the outcome of the case. The defendant has shown, in other words, that he cannot be trusted to abide by rules or conditions. And I guess they actually found a note that inferred that he wants to blackmail victims and witnesses into silence by providing testimony, or into providing testimony that's actually helpful to his defense. So I guess what I'm wondering is, he does realize all this is being taped. You're using someone else's, privileges, but they're watching everything.
Okay.
A 3-way call, it's being recorded.
So my takeaway was much different from that. My takeaway was, I'm going to wait for the government to file a superseding indictment, which we all believe is coming, because right now it looks a little thin. And it looks a little pathetic, I'm going to be honest with you. Because, yes, it's great to make Diddy look like this maniacal mob boss, which, of course he's using the influence of his money. But does anyone, again, it's good for the person who never ever dealt with someone in jail. How many inmates, and Vlad, no names here, how many inmates do you know that do 3-way call? They all do it.
Yeah.
They all do it.
I talk to inmates
and it's always
on cell phones while locked up in Rikers.
Exactly. And
I'm not going to say who.
And no one is saying, yo, Vlad, this is to influence my case. Sometimes they just call, be like, yo, what's the word out there, man? Everything good? You're like, yeah, I'm going to come home soon. It's all good. Blah. Sometimes it's never. So that I thought was a little bit thin. Obviously, they're trying to keep him in jail. Him putting money on other people's books. Yeah, he's a rich guy. He wants to have his privileges, right? Now, this whole thing of him trying to blackmail people, and I hate to even, because some people are going to be like, oh, no, he's getting Diddy's back. No, I'm defending someone who is, and this could be anybody, who's locked up and using whatever he can to his advantage to try to get things looking better for himself before he goes to trial.
Yeah, but some of this stuff is illegal. You can't
everybody does it.
You can't, it doesn't matter if everyone else does it. For everyone else, it'll be a slap on the wrist. Everyone knows this is a big fish. No slaps on the wrist.
As whispers and murmurs rippled through the room, the judge's gavel came down hard, demanding order. The tension in the courtroom was nearly unbearable. The revelation had disrupted the proceedings in a way no one had anticipated. Even the opposing counsel looked momentarily taken aback, their reactions telling the story of how unexpected this turn of events truly was. Despite the judge's efforts to restore calm, it was clear that the revelations had sent shockwaves that would resonate long after today.
Judge denying him bail, saying that there were no conditions that she could conceive of that would make her confident that he would appear again for other court appearances. The judge saying, my concern is this is a crime that happens behind closed doors. Diddy's lawyers had argued that he had made good faith efforts by showing up in New York, ready to surrender to face these charges. But prosecutors said that he could not be trusted, that he has a history of trying to intimidate witnesses, including some who are going to be witnesses in this case. They urged the judge to remand him. She did. And when the judge did, Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table with his attorneys, did not show any signs of emotion. He took a sip of water before he was led out of the courtroom by the U.S. Marshals. Now, his lawyers have vowed to fight this. They are going to be back in court on Wednesday before the judge who will oversee this trial.
On the other side of the courtroom, Diddy's attorney leaned in closely, speaking in hushed tones. It was clear the legal team was reeling from the revelation. Their whispered conversation was intense, their eyes darting back and forth between the judge, Diddy, and the legal papers in front of them. The shock of the moment had given way to strategy, with the team trying to quickly reassess how to move forward in light of the new developments. Every second mattered now. This could change the course of the case entirely.
Sean Diddy Combs will try for the third time to get bail today while he awaits trial on sex trafficking and racketeering charges. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York City, where this hearing happened earlier today. Alex, there was already a hearing earlier this week looking at notes taken out of Sean Combs' cell. How could that impact his chances at bail? His team says that raiding his cell, monitoring his calls, is not allowed and not fair to allow him to prep for a trial.
You know, it'll be interesting to see if this ends up happening. We just got out of this hearing, nearly 2 hours long, and they only talked about these notes at the very beginning. They discussed essentially whether or not they said the word legal on them. And there was a bit of a discrepancy from the defense. Essentially, they backtracked on this even just a little bit. Essentially, he has these binders, legal pads that, according to the photographs from the raid on his cell, did not say the word legal. All of a sudden, now they do. And the defense couldn't exactly say when the word legal was written. And that matters because if it said legal on any of these notes, that is part of attorney-client privilege. Those are things that should not have been taken out of his cell. So there is a big question about that. But Nate, the bigger issue here now is he going to get out? As of tonight, he is still going back to his jail cell. But next week, we will know whether or not he is going to be able to get out until his trial. So the big discussion here, according to the government, is can they trust him? He has proposed a whole laundry list of things that he's willing to do if they'll let him out. Things like 24/7 security, things like not speaking to anybody, not having internet access, phone access, unless it's through this 24/7 security company. But the government and pretrial services, who is separate from the prosecution, they're not buying it. They're saying that they cannot trust Sean Combs to not follow the law or to not follow the rules that he has even set out for himself. They say because he's already broken the rules that the department, the Bureau of Prisons, and his own counsel have laid out for him within a jail cell. So they're essentially saying if he can't do it there, how could he do it in the comfort of an apartment? They had tried to get him released to Star Island, his home on Star Island right in Miami, because it's an island and there's a dock there. The judge immediately said absolutely.
Outside the courthouse, the frenzy reached a boiling point. Reporters and cameramen crowded around, shouting questions and trying to get answers from anyone who would speak. The buzz was no longer about what was happening in the courtroom. It was about the revelations that had already been shared and the possibility of even more explosive details to come. Social media exploded in real time, with hashtags trending within minutes, making it clear that this story was far from over.
So what his defense team has now proposed instead is bringing him to an Upper East Side apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment where they say they would have 2 security guards inside of his apartment at all times, 1 downstairs. Again, the judge has not really said whether or not he is keen on this. He didn't really disclose if he's leaning one way or another, but he did ask a lot of questions about what that would look like. Again, the government not buying it, as well as pretrial services, which is the organization, the department that would have to make sure that everything was on the up and up.
Yeah, Alex, I wonder also, whether there was discussion of that now infamous video back from 2016 of Combs beating his girlfriend at the time, Cassie, the entertainer. Did that get discussed at all in the hearing today?
It did, because the defense is saying that the prosecution basically took the video that CNN originally published and gave it to the judge in that exact form, which is that it was edited down and they say out of order. They say essentially that the video ends with Cassie being dragged back to the room. They say that's not how it happened. They say it's important to know that that is not how it happened. But according to the defense, they say, or according to the government rather, they say it doesn't really matter because what you can see is what happened there. Her getting beaten up, her getting kicked, all of these violent things in nature. And what I don't think has been reported enough is that the allegation here isn't just that it was a squabble between the two of them, that it what the defense calls a lover's quarrel, but that inside the hotel room down the hallway that there was a male sex worker there that was part of these freak-offs. So it's not just about the abuse that happened in the hallway, but the prosecution wants to bring this into evidence because of what was actually happening inside of that hotel room. Now, the defense maintains that that wasn't the case. They maintain that the fight actually happened because he was just trying to get his phone and clothing back. But even still, this video was even used today in the discussion about how violent they believe Sean Combs is and why he cannot be released on bail.
Yeah, Alex, I read about 90% politics all day long, but I mean, this is one of the stories that, breaks through, especially coming from the entertainment industry. Such a big entertainer for such a long time. Safe to say that this story not going anywhere anytime soon. National correspondent Alex Miller.
With his revelation made, TD Jakes walked away from the podium, his expression calm and collected. The weight of his words still hung in the air, but his silence spoke volumes. Reporters pressed in, hoping for more details, but TD Jakes offered no further comment. His role in the day's drama was over, but the impact of what he had said would echo throughout the proceedings and the public's understanding of the case for weeks to come.
Says he's already privately settled some of the accused. That's after his firm sent out demand letters. Diddy is currently locked up and facing multiple charges, including racketeering and human trafficking. Despite 2 requests to be released, Diddy has been denied bail. His mother, Janice Combs, has spoken out for the first time since this arrest. She released a statement. It reads, "It is heartbreaking to see my son judged not for the truth, but for a narrative created out of lies. My son is not the monster they have painted him to be, and he deserves a chance to tell his side." Joining us to talk about it here on The Factor Uncensored tonight, we have defense attorney and former Harris County prosecutor Bioji Akingbala, Harris County Precinct 1 trafficking director Kathy Griffin-Grignon, and radio personality J Mac from 97.9 The Box. Glad to have you all here on The Factor Uncensored. So, J Mac, when you hear that there could be more people out there, more celebrities, who are already settling cases quietly, are you surprised? Are you shocked?
That's a smart thing to do. You don't want us in your business. You don't want to be on the Isaiah Factor.
On the morning show, right?
On the morning show. And then you heard his mom. She's doing what a mom is supposed to do. If you pay my bills, I would say, hey, that's not the guy I know.
But then again, of course, you don't treat your mother that way. You may not tell your mother what's going on.
Come on, man. His mama know. Oh, his mama know.
Trust me. I'm being naive. The naivete is showing tonight.
Your mom is going to always know what you're doing. You might think she don't know, but she know.
Got it. Bioji, let's talk about some of the celebrities, which no names have been named as of yet, who may have settled these cases. Is that the prudent, smart thing to do?
I think considering that these civil cases are closely tied to the federal case that Diddy's facing, it's certainly a smart thing to do to perhaps try to get your name out of the public eye, get your name away from the specter of the federal investigators, and just try to settle your case privately, assuming that there is some sufficient evidence to believe that these civil attorneys have something on you.
Back inside the courtroom, Diddy and his legal team were locked in a quiet yet intense conversation. Their heads huddled together as they rapidly discussed their next move. The clock was ticking, and every decision mattered. This was no longer just about defending Diddy. It was about counteracting a game-changing revelation that had turned everything on its head. Each legal advisor weighed in, trying to formulate a strategy to regain control of the narrative.
Defendant in one of these cases and someone suing you, would they typically require a non-disclosure agreement to be signed once they settle it with the plaintiff or the victim in this case?
You know, if I was an attorney representing one of these individuals accused, I would certainly request for that before agreeing to any out-of-court settlement. Otherwise, it kind of takes away the point of doing it out of court. It's going to end up being public. I might as well continue to fight the allegations.
And sometimes, Catherine, when you're a victim in human trafficking or sex crimes like this, money can't always satisfy you. And do you foresee any of these individuals, whether it's men or women, coming forward later, even though they've signed the NDA, even though they've been paid, saying, look, it was me, and this is who did it?
Well, after you get paid,
right?
Okay, and you done spent that money,
Uh-huh.
and then you got to take care of the I, the R, and the S, who are real pimps. Then they're gonna talk. You know, what's done in the dark comes to the light, and who? I know you don't have a 50-foot bed in your backyard, do you?
Don't assume too much.
I'm just trying to tell you. But it's interesting because I was, you know, I've been following it, and today on TMZ, you know, it was stated that a celebrity that's bigger.
As the legal team strategized, Diddy paced slowly across the courtroom. His mind was racing, his thoughts undoubtedly trying to process the shock he had just witnessed. His movements were deliberate, almost as if he were physically working through his frustration. The courtroom had grown quiet, the usual bustle now replaced by an almost eerie stillness as all eyes were on Diddy, waiting to see how he would react to the bombshell that had just been dropped.
Michael's with me now. Let's just deal with the, if you will, the logistics before we turn to the gravamen. The refusal of bail in these circumstances, bearing in mind he'd flown to New York to turn himself in, so he was preempted by the police. Are you surprised that he was refused bail?
Well, I'm glad to be with you. I'm not surprised at all. I mean, the nature of these charges are so serious, the allegations are so serious, that it's not surprising that this hearing he was denied bail. The judge has to look at things like whether or not he could be expected to return to court. Does he have the manner and means to perhaps evade law enforcement and not appear? Is he a flight risk, in other words? And so I think at this point, the judge has decided that the fact that he was doing these acts in secret did not obviously lend much to his statements that he will be open and available. So I'm not surprised at all. But again, we will see what the district judge now does, since the case has been, or the decision has been at least appealed up, whether or not there are some terms of bail that might make the court comfortable that he will show up for court.
Now, turning to the charges themselves, they are amongst the most serious, which would involve very long periods of incarceration if convicted. But it also raises the question, if there was a plea deal at some point in the future, to plead down from these very serious charges, the lesser accepted offences would also be serious and could end up in prison.
I think any plea discussion of the case, because you have such significant impact on the victims of the case, would necessitate that he be sentenced to prison in some way. I just don't think that a judge would take and place him on probation or some type of house arrest, given the allegations that were made, no matter what the plea discussions were. And remember, the prosecution and a defendant can negotiate a plea amongst themselves, but a court has the decision finally on whether or not to accept that recommendation, and ultimately has the authority to make a decision about whether or not a prison sentence is appropriate. We operate under the federal sentencing guidelines. Those give the judge some parameters to consider, things like whether or not somebody accepts responsibility, whether or not there have been an adverse impact on victims, whether or not there's been excessive fraud and deceit through the investigation of the case. Those things come into play as we talk about what might happen if there is a plea agreement that's ultimately reached.
It's important to remember, besides obviously he's innocent until proven guilty at the moment, but it's also important to remember that not being a nice person, being an unnice person, if you will, is not a crime. They're going to have to prove the elements of the offences in these cases, just because he might.
As the case continued, a new piece of evidence was suddenly introduced, one that sent a wave of gasps through the courtroom. The air seemed to freeze for a moment as the details began to unfold. What had been anticipated as a small piece of the puzzle had now grown into something far more significant, leaving everyone to question the broader implications. Diddy's legal team immediately shifted their focus, trying to handle this new twist in the case with precision and care.
Sordid details. They are particularly troubling as it relates to whether or not the allegations are true, on whether or not certain people, victims in the case, were given drugs at the time to get them to do these sex acts, whether or not there's been some effort to blackmail or extort or silence victims in the case by the use of videotaped, and to call it pornography would probably be too nice. I would just say dark type of pornography. It sounds like, these are things that a judge is going to have to consider as we go forward.
Finally, back to the logistics, if you will. He was prepared to turn himself in today, so we understand. The arrest removed from him the almost right to bail. Since I was going to turn myself in, I'm entitled to bail if I'd had turned myself in. By arresting him, the prosecution removed that possibility.
Well, they certainly removed the argument for him to make that he had turned himself in. It's mighty hard to, when you fly into town on a jet and you're there, to argue that there's no possible way you could be a flight risk. And that's one of the things the judge would consider. Another thing would be the nature of the charges, the allegations that were made. They span a long period of time. There were efforts to influence witnesses, it sounds like. At least that's been an allegation that has been made. These are all things that get put into that decision. The fact that he just would have turned himself in, that would have been in his favor. But there are so many other factors at play that it wouldn't have surprised me to see a court dig into those a little bit in making a decision whether bail would be appropriate. And at this stage, a judge has determined that bail is not appropriate. He has a right, and has done apparently so, to appeal that decision and have another hearing on it. At that time, his lawyers will have a chance to make these arguments about, the efforts that he was making to cooperate and to get there. The term cooperation, frankly, sometimes gets